Hi, this is Bruce Rawles, and I'm speaking again with Susan Dugan, and we are going to talk again, as we usually do, about A Course in Miracles. And today we thought we'd talk about lesson number 194 in the workbook, which is I Place the Future in the Hands of God. And as we were just chatting briefly before we started the recording, this is a applicable lesson for any time or place. So anyway, do you have any news or announcements, Susan, before we get started?
No real announcements.
Oh,
No.
okay. Okay. All right.
Yeah. How about you? Are you? Did you announce
Nothing
anything?
much,
Or yeah. Okay. All right.
to mention.
So we'll concentrate on the present then.
That sounds good. Yeah, really. Yeah. Even though we're talking about the future, but we'll
Right.
keep it present focused. So do you want to read the first paragraph or
Well, I just wanted to talk about it a little bit first.
Sure,
I think,
sure, you bet.
I mean, I think it is inviting us back to the present, this lesson, because, well, it starts out, I place the future in the hands of God. And that is a metaphorical statement because, the Course tells us that God doesn't actually know about this world. But part of the healing of our mind is he speaks to us in this language of a forgiving God, of a God that, loves us unconditionally and is not in any way any grievances toward us for having separated from him. God thinks otherwise, we're told in the Course about everything that we've interpreted here. So when, to say I place the future in the hands of God is where, in a sense, is where it already is, because the idea of time never really left the one mind. That's a level one statement. Ken Wapnick would say that's the truth of what we are, and nothing really progressed from that tiny mad idea of what would it be like to be separate from God. In truth, the one child of God, laughed that off, and it returned to the ether from which it sprang. But a part of our mind took it seriously. We seem to be living all of the possible consequences of what it would be like to be separate from God, and the necessary theater for those consequences is the idea of time itself, of a past, of sin in the past, that this really happened, of the guilt that is always sort of nagging within my mind, although I don't really, I find causes outside for it that I make up, but really where it's coming from is that original thought of oh, I really did do this to God, and now I'm really screwed, and I have to try to cover it up, and I have to escape, and all of those things, all the defenses that we made as a result. And then there's always this fear of punishment in the future. So, so we're constantly, literally sort of hell-bent on trying to find someone to blame for, or someone or something to blame guilt. And we have no end of other dream figures that we imagine to pin it on, to get rid of the guilt. Which works rarely to relieve it, but never ultimately does anything to actually remove it or undo it. Is of course this word, and leaves it actually strengthened because we keep focusing outside ourselves and trying to make it real. And I think for me, the wanting to use this to talk about this lesson, we haven't talked in a while, by the way, but it's nice to be talking again. But I place the future in the hands of God. I mean, I was just really have been noticing this summer again how much I stress about the future of my body and the future of this world that we're living in. And
you must be alone in that.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what's up with me, but. But it's always this constant sort of how much nothing is ever okay, within my mind. I have times where and this is really what this lesson is about. It's inviting us back into the holy instant, and that time of to step outside, even for a minute, a glimpse, a moment with Jesus, and experience a shift in that perception. We see that we're really not under siege all the time, and that everybody here is fighting the same hard battle, as Ken used to say. And so I felt like it was something that I needed. I always teach because because it's something I need to learn, and I think that this lesson is as good as any to bring us back to our right minds, and recognize that we always have a choice about what we're accepting, which teacher we're listening to, what reality we're accepting at any given moment. And when we find ourselves in this anxiety and dread and fear about our futures, the future of my personal self, the future of my personal world, that that is always a sign that I have with the ego as my teacher. And there's always a method to my madness, and it's always, again, to prove that I exist at God's expense, that it's somehow not my fault. And that way lies more madness. There is no way that is going to that thought process is going to lead me to anything but more suffering. And so Jesus is always kind of telling us in the Course, suffering is not a sin, it's a mistake, and you can suffer as long as you want. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but it's silly. It's just silly. You don't have to keep torturing yourself and punishing yourself like this. And of course, we think otherwise. We think is our view of salvation is atonement, which involves sacrifice and which involves suffering and purification. And so, in some sense, we all have or many of us at least have that, even perhaps in the way we were raised, that idea that somehow if I can just suffer enough, I'll finally be okay. I'll finally be forgiven. I'll finally be, God will have mercy on me. And that's because we have created this God out of the ego's image, to cooperate with us. But the real God is unperturbed by any of this, and that's where we truly still abide. So I've gone on a long time, but as a way of introduction, I think those are some of the fundamental things that this lesson addresses.
Very much so. Very well stated. When you use purification, I was thinking how just one word that's an example of countless ideas that the ego and the Holy Spirit are completely antithetical to each other and opposite in every way. And and you mentioned purification and suffering, kind of in the same breath, and that's the ego's assumption is that in order to purify, you have to suffer by experiencing some kind of lack or deprivation, usually. And in truth, if what we are all is everything, not in the space-time kind of sense, but in a spiritual essence sense, then we lack nothing. And so the purification really is instead of subtracting, it's really adding all that we think that we lack, and having an inclusive identity that embraces everyone and everything on an essence level. And that purification really is just looking at our wanting to exclude, or as you point out very eloquently, are wanting to be a victim of these alleged others. and we've made up a biological and a physics realm in our minds that seems to be very consistent, but it's all fabrications of a madman and having a colossal dream that appears to have separate parts and separate actors, and that the purification really is seems like more and more it comes to mind that what we're really doing is purifying ourselves of the looking without judgment at the ego's insanity, and realizing that its belief in death and sacrifice and deprivation really is at the heart of the insanity, and nothing could be further from the truth. Is that we really are all each other, and if that's true, then we lack for nothing.
Right.
But that's not how we normally look at the world. So.
Right. And I think purification is more an ego term, because it involves the idea of sin.
Right. Right.
You have to wash clean, and whereas the Course is maybe referring to it as undoing. With the barriers to our awareness that there was no sin,
Exactly.
So yeah. So in that sense, we're allowing the undoing of system through this process of forgiveness, through this process of going back to in the moment, and looking at all of these. Really, our reactions, our anxiety, all of those emotions that come up and seem to be coming up because of something that's happening out there, are really all an inside job. They're all just reflecting that choice for the ego and that guilt that we're carrying over this false belief. And so, if we can use that as our reminder that we've just chosen the ego again. And sometimes that's all we're able to do. Our fear is so great, we can't really take the next step. All we can do is question the cause of, lesson 5, I'm not upset for the reason I think, is always sort of that first reflective of that first step of forgiveness. And, that just means, maybe I'm wrong maybe it isn't because of what's happening, of what I think might happen in to my personal body, or to my collective world. Maybe it's because of something else going on in my mind, this guilt that I'm not aware of, and that's enough to at least open the door to the realization that I must be choosing to suffering. I have a choice. The second step is I could see peace instead of this, lesson 34. So maybe I'm not ready to see peace instead of this, because we're pretty attracted to the suffering, we're pretty attracted to the drama of all of this. And we're not consciously aware of that, but we know by its results, we know by the symptoms of it, and the way in which we become obsessed by it, and the way in which we may follow it and find ourselves, obsessing about it, or in lots of conversations with others that agree with us about it. There must be quite an attraction there, and Jesus talks about that constantly in the Course. That's what keeps this all real in my mind, and it keeps me real, and that's what where the real attraction is, because we've forgotten that we have another reality. Preserving the idea of me is extremely important to us. Even in the face of the constant, nagging awareness that it's not going to end well. The jig is going to be up at some point for the body, for sure. We've traded mortality for eternity. Yep. Anyway, but I think this lesson. We could start with paragraph 2, actually. Paragraph 1 is really a very, talks about what it's leading us to heaven, but that we don't really understand that, and it's not really something that we can even really relate to in the condition we think we're in. So the practical stuff, I think, starts.
The nitty-gritty, yeah.
Paragraph. Yeah.
Let's dive in, sure. You want to read the first paragraph, or the second paragraph?
Okay. Except, and I think it's interesting to see how many times it says except, but accept today's idea, and you have passed all anxiety, all pits of hell, all blackness of depression, thoughts of sin, and devastation brought about by guilt. Idea, and you have released the world from all imprisonment by loosening the heavy chains that locked the door to freedom on it. You are saved, and your salvation thus becomes the gift you give to the world because you have received. So, I mean, accepting this idea is not something, is a process. It's not something that we just do. This is really, it points us to the real world beyond this, where all of it's gone, all the depression of believing that I'm separate, all of the fear about, the belief in sin, guilt, and fear, the need to blame others for it. All of that has been, to love, have been undone in my mind. So I don't need to keep projecting like that. But accepting that, the way that we begin to accept that idea is in the moment, as, one illusion at a time, one reaction, dreadful reaction at a time. That and that's our invitation really to the Holy Spirit, that we could step back and enjoy a holy instant in which we taste what the real world promises us at the end of the journey. Anyway, but your thoughts? Or
Yeah, I think what you just said kind of reminded me that I think because this is a practical course, it reminds us first, like this first paragraph of reminding us of these kind of lofty ideas and the truth of what we are, which we normally, like you say, don't really grok. We don't really get that because it just seems so far from our everyday experience. But it returns us to the idea being, of course, the course's idea really is all about forgiveness and releasing ourselves from the heavy chains and the the locked doors that we've made to freedom, and we do that by looking at the devastation that the ego thought system represents, not investing our identity in it. And I think one of the primary mechanisms, in addition to trusting our inner kindness teacher, aka Holy Spirit, which Ken points out in the journey through the manual, one of the things I remember him stating in there was that the other companion idea that goes all through that particular book was the idea of shared interest. And the shared interest really becomes sort of a training wheel idea for the all-inclusive oneness that we don't really, get on a level that we normally relate to, because it's just so far out of our normal thinking. But the shared interest really is becomes an emissary or a symbol or a metaphor for that oneness, that we all have the same spirit, the same essence, the same ultimate need and want, which is to remember that this is all a dream. That the insanity of duality is just a crazy notion that really had no effect and therefore had no cause, and we can, from the right perspective, gently laugh at it and see that we can afford to have those moments of respite by seeing we're all in the same boat and having that shared interest.
And when we
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. But when we choose Jesus as our teacher, that is how we shift to the idea of shared interests. It's usually that we see ourselves first not having shared interests, making it about me, wanting it to have everything my way. And I certainly noticed that more and more myself. I think this practice, we become very, very aware of really thinking and feeling, and of that it's not pretty a lot of the time, that we spend a lot of our time, most of our time, in judgment and in some way trying to separate ourselves, to go our own way, and I really see that in myself, and we have to invite Jesus in, or it's excruciatingly painful. That because we then, it's very, very difficult not to judge yourself when you see the hateful nature of the ego thought system, alive within you, and how really childishly selfish we can be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
So,
that's the whole desolation and devastation that the
yeah,
ego represents. And I think that typically we we reveal that slowly a bit, more each day, each year, kind of thing.
right,
And at the same time, where we develop an increasingly greater identification with, as we look at that with our inner kindness teacher, with the real the reality of what we are, with the shared interests,
right,
and we have those moments of respite and
right.
peace that come from just saying, wow, that doesn't work, does it?
This
I
is
really can
really
afford to let that go if I can just stop for a moment, not condemn myself, and just say, wow,
right,
that really is something that's worthy of my compassion for myself and for every other being in the cosmos that's in that same apparent plight. um,
right.
yeah.
Because everybody's suffering from
Oh
that.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
they're in touch with they're not in touch with the cause, and we're beginning to, sort of automatically recognize that we're wrong about the cause. At least that's a really good interim step.
Yeah.
Um, and and so, but the pain of the human condition of believing that we're here is universal, and it's what causes all of the victim and victimizing us and within us. I mean, it is within us. It's within the mind, and so we try to distance ourselves from it all the time, and we really can't. And that's a horrible place to be. I mean, everybody's suffering from that. So I think we do begin to, if we can try not to judge ourselves and to be compassionate with ourselves, and that takes some mindfulness too, because
Oh, very much.
we to make it real, the ego really wants to make us suffer with it and punish ourselves. And if we can just see that, this is, why I'm doing this, and that it is painful, and that I'm really not the only one here feeling this, because we're always trying to make ourselves different from other people, and we do it in that way too. And I think compassion does kind of come from that process for yourself and others. All that, but it's a process. It's not always there. We have to sort of invoke it. We have to turn toward our teacher, ask for help.
Yep.
Yeah,
Just noticing, person by person, incident by incident, that we're all in the same boat,
exactly.
widens our sphere of identity, and slowly we begin to generalize and realize, okay, yep, we really are all working on the same undoing,
Right.
and afford an infinite patience and infinite compassion for
Exactly.
everyone, including the one that we see in the mirror most often.
Right. Right. Which
That
is,
appears to be a separate self. Yeah.
right. Right. Um, so the next paragraph, do you want to read that? And no
Sure,
one is.
sure. In no one instant is depression felt or pain experienced or loss perceived. In no one instant sorrow can be set upon a throne and worshipped faithfully. In no one instant can one even die. And so each instant given unto God in passing, with the next one given him already, is the time of your release from sadness, pain, and even death itself.
Yeah. I mean, in no one instant, elsewhere it says, I forget where in the course, but does the body exist at all,
I
right?
was just thinking of that one. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so, I mean, again, that points to that idea of time, of sin in the past, guilt in the present, and fear of retribution or punishment in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And but if we go back to right now at this very moment, otherwise, I could choose otherwise. We can step outside the dream for a moment, and which is stepping outside of time, and see that Jesus doesn't perceive it this way. And if Jesus doesn't, and that's the only part of my mind that's sane, I I could be sane instead of this. And
Uh-huh.
maybe I don't want to right now, but it at least sort of diffuses my full belief in the cause, right? I mean, I can't be fully invested in the cause and questioning it at the same time and realizing that peace is available right now. I mean, that gets me in touch with the idea that I am choosing, which is a sort of um, covert way of backing up into the decision-making mind, you know, away from the body, stepping back from my reality, my belief in the reality itself. And I mean, even if it's just a little ways, it's that gives me some perspective that I do have a choice. You know?
Exactly. Even the slightest little twinge of recognition that you know there must be some better way than the misery that we put ourselves through, you know, is really using the cognitive dissonance that the Course is one of its primary mechanisms for, you know, alerting us to the insanity that the ego represents, and suggesting peacefully and patiently that there really is an option that has nothing to do with the dream figures we've made up, including ourselves. That but uses those figures as the classroom for undoing of the belief that we're, you know, imprisoned by those.
Exactly. Yeah.
It just turns
Yeah.
the very same mechanism around, and the prison becomes a classroom, and
That's right. And that's the important thing, is that it's a classroom, and
yeah,
you know, but in which we're going to make mistakes, as all learners do along the way, you know, and that's okay.
yeah,
It's not a sin, you know. And each time we can sort of survive our reactions and see that it really didn't have the effect that we thought it would, you know, because we believe that you know, that we can wreak havoc with our thoughts, right? Really. And it's you know, I mean, that's true with bodies, but bodies aren't real. Bodies aren't true.
yeah.
And so, you know, that's what we're learning, is that the ego thought system doesn't have the power it claims to and threatens constantly.
There's a Mark Twain quote that was paraphrased by another author that I refer to sometimes. It's something to the effect of, "There's been a lot of tragedy in my life, and some of it actually happened." And I like to further paraphrase that by the Course version that Jesus would probably amend it to read would be, "There hasn't been any tragedy in my life because none of it happened."
Right,
and,
right.
and that's it's really only from that perspective of the battleground. So we kind of need the training wheels version, which is the first one, I think, most of the time, to kind of
Right.
ease
We do
into it.
one illusion at a time. Again, you
Yeah.
know, the more present we can stay with this,
Mm-hmm.
and notice as we do that, that some illusions seem a lot harder to apply this to than others. We have a hierarchy
Exactly.
of illusions, and that's what we're learning too. That you know, that appearances lie. That you know, there is no the good and evil that we're constantly witnessing and giving. You know, putting on the old applause meter they used to have on you know, quiz shows and stuff. And you know, the ego loves the you know, who's the real hero and victim here. We love victims, you know, we don't love victimizers. We want to see them condemned, and we think there's a difference in the court. And you know, Jesus sees otherwise, right? It's all coming from the same belief that we could victimize God, you know, and be culpable as a result. And it's just silly. It didn't happen. So I'll go on to paragraph 4. God holds your future as he holds your past and present. I mean, it didn't go anywhere. This high idea of time didn't, you know, it didn't take place. And so they should be one to you. Yet in this world, the temporal progression still seems real. And so you are not asked to understand the lack of sequence really found in time. You are but asked to let the future go. God's hands. And you will see by your experience that you have laid the past and present in his hands as well, because the past will punish you no more, and future dread will now be meaningless. And you know, that's really that holy instant in which we're willing to just say, you know, I would like to see this with you. You know, I would like to see peace instead of this. I must be wrong about, you know, the cause of this. And in that moment, we are not enslaved anymore by time. You know, we have that taste of eternity. We have that glimpse of the real world that, you know, is at the top of the ladder when all of the when the future and past really are gone, at least in our awareness. You know, we don't are no longer bound to what's going to happen to my body, and we see everyone as equally free. So
Those moments of trust really are uh, inspirations that carry
yeah,
us further, aren't they?
experience, he says, and I love the way the course is also very practical. It isn't asking us to believe the metaphysics. We have to understand them, but they go directly against all of our experience. The idea that there is no time, that there is no you know, separation, that God is that we are abstract, you know, an abstract undifferentiated union with God. We don't know what that means. And so he tells us constantly, you can't understand this. Don't even try. You know, understanding will dawn on you at the top of the ladder, you know, in the real world. But right now, your job, the earthly form of love, is forgiveness, and that's all we have to focus on is right now. You know, which teacher have I chosen? And you know, can I use this as a classroom, or have I tried to use it to root myself more deeply in this dream of separation and exile from God? So
We think we're abandoned in some desolate place, but we've only done the abandoning in our own imagination.
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Shall I read the next one?
Yeah. Sure.
Release the future, for the past is gone, and what is present, freed from its bequest of grief and misery, of pain and loss, becomes the instant in which time escapes the bondage of illusions, where it runs its pitiless inevitable course. Then is each instant which was slave to time transformed into a holy instant, when the light that was kept hidden in God's Son is free to bless the world. Now is he free, and all his glory shines upon a world made free with him to share his holiness. What this one reminds me of is there's somewhere in the course, I don't recall exactly where, it says, you know, that if you saw not truth in him, paraphrasing greatly, you know, he won't see truth in you, or something like that. You know, it's
Right.
extremely paraphrased, but it's sort of like we kind of go into each interaction we have with everyone and every situation with, you know, the pre conditioning of the thought system that we go into it with, and there's only two of them. So
Right.
in other words, if we go into something with an expectation of, well, I'm going to be, you know, the victim of this, then sure enough, that's what seems to happen. And if we go into a situation with, I'm going to remember that my brother, my sister, whoever I am with, you know, metaphorically, is exactly the savior that I need to be receptive to in terms of the truth of what they are, reflecting the truth of what I am, and see the completion of spirit
Right.
in that person, then that becomes, you know, a mutually freeing thing, and we're never healed alone, because there
That's right.
really is only just one of us. And we're all
Right. And no matter
together.
what, you know, what we experience with another person, our or you know what the form of of what's happening is, our experience can be peaceful,
Hmm.
you know, can be loving. It really is not contingent on what's happening, you know, the form of what's happening. And I'm noticing more and more in the course, you know, when for many years, when I was going to say when we first come to the course, but for many years, I think, you know, we're searching so much for him to tell us that the form is going to change. You know, that if I do this correctly, that somehow it'll be literally a happier dream. You know, that in form and in behavior and all of those things. And more as I'm reading through the course, how little he really is saying that. I mean, sometimes there's comforting, words that can be misunderstood like that, because he is trying to meet us in the condition we think we're in. But almost always he's talking about our experience, our perception, our perspective. He's really not, the ego is always looking for the loophole. But in truth, the Course is saying, no, your experience is what we're talking about. All this is your experience. That will tell you, which teacher you've chosen. And it's completely irrelevant what's happening to my body, what's happening to other bodies. Those are just, that's just the curriculum that is leading you to peace. That's just the script of a fragmentation that you drew at this time. And there's many scenarios of it, but they're all the same. It doesn't really matter, what is happening in the dream. And how freeing that really is, because that's really how we will learn this is not what we think it is. The body is not, has nothing to do with anything. The body is completely neutral, as those early workbook lessons tell us, and it doesn't live or die. It doesn't have anything to need to defend. It's just an idea. It's just the reflection of idea. And it can be treated lovingly and used for another purpose of forgiveness, and then it's gently let go. The idea of it is let go. The idea, So anyway, it's just
yeah.
But,
as you're saying that, I was thinking, well, in a sense, if we're really undoing the belief in separation, then a palatable or reasonable metaphor that we might be able to use to kind of give ourselves a gradual process of trying to figure that out might be, well, we're putting the pieces back together, and
right.
and each thing that we forgive is like something that we programmed going into the dream as something that would push our buttons, and then we recognize that as we reassemble
Right.
the elements, all those things that seem to push our buttons no longer have that impact, because we recognize, well, that was something I made as a saboteur, as the ego, to trip myself up. But as the Holy Spirit then translates the exact same objects and people and things and circumstances, then those then become the props in the classroom, so to speak, that then help us reintegrate that identity that we never really ripped apart. So
right. What the line from the Course, what the ego made to hurt, the Holy Spirit uses to heal, or something like that. But yes, exactly. They become, the lessons, the sweet lessons of forgiveness. The gentle lessons of
exactly.
Instead of,
And that you made another important point too, that I think that I kind of caught when I was putting the subtitle to my second book together, which was, I started out with forgiving the dream of separation, and realized, well, no, that just doesn't really cut it. It's got to be forgiving the dreamer of separation. And,
right. That's
and
right.
that I think that's really a very vital point, is that the happy dreamer is really what we're after, because a happy dream, well, that's just a dream. But the dreamers in the theater, and the dream figures are on the screen, and what would we rather be?
Right.
I think that's the whole
source of it. There's nothing that, right, exactly. There is no such thing as a happy dream, really. Anything that is a dream that is otherwise, of otherness from God, is never really going to be happy. I mean, the happiness in the dream is a a disguise.
Right.
It's misery in disguise. So yeah, exactly.
And the happy dreamer is one that recognizes that they're dreaming,
right.
and has learned to forgive themselves for having made up a dream. Yeah.
Well, I'm starting chapter 18 in the text with my class the week after next. So maybe next time we talk, we could do the happy dreamer, or the hero of the dream, or something.
Yeah,
something.
that'd be good. That'd be great. That'd be great. Do you want to read the next one?
Yeah, so let's,
We don't do, I know you wanted to
we
wrap it
have
up
a
pretty
lot
quick.
more time. So,
Yeah, okay.
yes, I'll read the next one and
Okay.
maybe we'll read a couple more.
Okay.
I think I'd like to conclude with paragraph 8, maybe.
Okay.
But lesson for today, as a deliverance it really is, you will not hesitate to give as much consistent effort as you can to make it be a part of you. As it becomes a thought that rules your mind, a habit in your problem-solving repertoire, action to temptation, you extend your learning to the world. And as you learn to see salvation in all things, so will the world perceive that it is saved. And that's that, wonderful, idea that whether we see evidence of it or not in the world, that any time I choose for the decision-making mind and to choose the right mind, I'm strengthening the power of all fragments of the decision-making mind in ways that I can't understand and don't need to. Giving and receiving are really the same. So anyway, but you want to read the next one? And
Sure. What worry can beset the one who gives his future to the loving hands of God? What can he suffer? What can cause him pain or bring experience of loss to him? What can he fear? And what can he regard except with love? For he who has escaped all fear of future pain has found his way to present peace and certainty of care the world can never threaten. He is sure that his perception may be faulty, but will never lack correction. He is free to choose again when he has been deceived, to change his mind when he has made mistakes. And boy, what a great example of the gentle,
yes,
tolerant correction principle that the Course espouses, which is really the, like, nothing happened, so don't beat yourself up. Just pick yourself up, dust
it's a
yourself
mistake.
off, and
It's not a crime. It's not a sin.
exactly,
Yeah,
choose once
and also
again.
that Jesus always acknowledges that this is a process. He knows that we're going to. What does he say? He will never lack correction. He is free to choose again when he has been deceived. Deceived many times. This is going to take a long time for us. I mean, that's the kind use of time within the dream, to use time, to make our lives a classroom for the process of forgiveness. And it's both right now and it's also over time that the undoing takes place. And that's a right-minded use of time, of what we were saying earlier, of taking what the ego made to hurt and using it, offering it to the Holy Spirit to allow my mind to heal. Faithful to my classroom, being faithful to my teacher, learning to be, because we're not all that faithful. we have an attention span of I don't know, an infant, right?
Right. And on a good day, it's close, approximating that of a
Yeah.
gnat, maybe, huh?
At least for the journey home, we have the attention span that we may have for for the horrible atrocities that are being wrought against us is pretty riveting at times. But yeah, so
And even that we can use as when we discover things that seem egregiously outrageous, we can recognize that even there's opportunities to see that everyone's in the same boat. I recently watched a documentary called "Get Me Roger Stone" about the fellow behind the
uh-huh,
current administration's promotion for the last 3 decades plus, and it was pretty eye-opening. And at the same time, I was realizing, well, okay, so this political party has been co-opted for decades,
right,
and I looked at all the stuff that was okay. This is a projection of my mind as well as what appears to be outside. But at the same time, there was interviews with this person's family members, and loving father, and yada
right,
yada, it's just a reminder that no matter who or what or how entrenched someone appears to be
right,
in ego thinking, within every single being, without exception, are those two thought systems and the decision-making faculty, and we all are dreaming that that duality has had some effect on reality, but it hasn't, and it's all equally forgivable.
Okay.
Yeah,
And the ego
despite the
thing,
behavioral
right?
ramifications. What, say again?
I'm doing very much otherwise, and we're always. I've been noticing in myself. We're always on the lookout when we've chosen the ego for the exception to the. What is not forgivable. What is not. I found myself, out loud to people. Well, this is outside the normal realm of the cyclical nature of politics, or this is, you're basically saying this is unforgivable. Like we just can't make this even normal, and that's not true. So again, it's my personal hierarchy of illusions that is I'm trying to protect, and why, so I can protect me. But so it's not to, we're going to do that, but that's the kind of thing that you have to just catch yourself and say, and I caught myself a few weeks ago saying, and this was to someone else in relation to my husband. I was talking about my husband, and it was another course student. So, we were in a real discussion about what was going on in our minds when we did this. And I said, well, somebody has to be horrible. And I didn't say it as a course teacher. I said it as, or a course student. I said it as, it came from very deep within my belief system. And I recognize, I started to laugh because I really, somebody does have to be horrible. I'm the horrible one, he's the horrible one. And we trade off on that, don't we?
Somebody's got to be the fall guy, right? No matter what.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And of course, what I define as horrible can be as insignificant as leaving dishes in the sink, or being or dripping stuff, messiness or something like that. So it's ridiculous. But anyway, so let's read the last paragraph and conclude with something very beautiful.
That sounds great.
Okay. This lesson is a solution that for our repertoire, and it's it's another way of looking at forgiveness. Place then your future in the hands of God, for thus you call the memory of Him to come again, replacing all your thoughts of sin and evil with the truth of love. Think you the world could fail to gain thereby, and every living creature not respond with healed perception himself to God, has also placed the world within the hands to which he has himself appealed for comfort and security. He lays aside the sick illusions of the world along with his, and offers peace to both. You should probably just read the last paragraph there. Yeah.
Okay. Now are we saved indeed, for in God's hands we rest untroubled, sure that only good can come to us. If we forget, we will be gently reassured. If we accept an unforgiving thought, it will soon be replaced by love's reflection. And if we are tempted to attack, we will appeal to Him who guards our rest to make the choice for us that leaves temptation far behind. No longer is the world our enemy, for we have chosen that we be its friend.
Aww.
Great choice. Thank you.
Yeah. So
good pick for a topic today.
We can't sustain that very long, I realize, but we can do it in a moment, and we can experience it. Just if we'll just stop for a second and say, this hurts too much. I want peace instead of this. So.
And we want those reinforcing moments. Truly, what we truly want is those reinforcing moments where we let ourselves and everyone else off the hook. Maybe not on the level of behavior, but on the level of spirit, where it really counts in our identity, that what really matters. And then that really is our true freedom, our true liberation. And
right, exactly.
That's what carries us home. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And it saves us thousands of years, we're told.
Yeah.
What the hell?
We're taking the scenic road to enlightenment, I figure. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan, as always. It's always been a pleasure. I've been talking with Susan Dugan, and this is Bruce Rawles, and I will post this on Susan's site, which is foraysinforgiveness.com, and also on aciblog.com. And thank you for joining us. And we'll share again from A Course in Miracles next time.